Welcome everyone out there to Radio Horror's YouTube channel's new segment I like to call The Franchise in 5 minutes. Hopefully. Maybe 10 minutes? Probably 5 minutes. Trying to keep it to 5 minutes. In honor of Insidious the Last Key that is out in theaters now, starring Lin Shaye, I thought I'd do the Insidious films. There's only 4 of them, so we should be able to do this in under 5 minutes. Insidious, the first movie in the franchise, came out in 2010. The movie starred Patrick Wilson as Josh Lambert, Rose Byrne as Renee Lambert, Ty Simpkins as Dalton Lambert, who was the little kid who was possessed, and would give us Lin Shaye as the longest-standing cast member of the series, besides her sidekicks, Specs and Tucker, were played by Leigh Whalen and Angus Simpson. Leigh Whalen is the writer of the Insidious franchise, directed by James Wan. In the films, we have a family moved into a house, and the little boy Dalton, he goes into some type of weird coma after having a head injury. 3 months pass, and they decide maybe the house is haunted, so Patrick Wilson decides to up and move his family, and it doesn't work. So his mother, played by Barbara Hershey, contacts an old friend of hers, Lin Shaye, and she comes in and tells Josh, Patrick Wilson's character, that they've met before, and he used to be able to do this. Now, it's kind of weird that he doesn't remember, but it's all this trauma that is completely blocked out. So what ends up happening is he goes into this place called the Further, or the Gray Zone, or the Other, but it's the Further. He has kind of shining powers, or maybe he has force-like powers, and his son does as well. So they can go into this weird place, talk to spirits, or guide through spirits, and it's one of the coolest parts of the whole movie. Now, the Further changes from film to film to film, but in the first movie, it's where it's at its creepiest. When they come out of the Further, they accidentally bring with them this woman in black who's trying to actually kill Lin Shaye's character, but we don't really find that out until the third film. So Dalton gets back in his body, and then Patrick Wilson kills Lin Shaye's character. End of the movie. Then we had to wait 3 years for the sequel to come out, Insidious Chapter 2 in 2013. All of the primary characters are back once again, but we also get a couple new ones, like Steve Coulter as Carl, and Jocelyn Donahue as young Lorraine, and Hank Harris as young Carl. In this, there's an investigation on what happened to Lin Shaye's character, and Tucker and Specs decide to go to the house of Lin Shaye, and that's where they meet up with Carl, and they find out that possibly Lin Shaye's ghost, Elise, is still alive inside the Further. All the while, Patrick Wilson's character, Josh, his spirit has been trapped in the Further, and the woman in black has taken over his body. So they need the help of Dalton to go in there and get their father out. Now, they're able to succeed in doing that, and the movie has a lot of really cool jump scares, and we get the Further once again, really giving us a creepy vibe to it. James Wan comes back to direct, and Leigh Whalen comes back to write it, too. This is what makes Chapter 2 basically a great accommodation to Chapter 1. With Josh returned to his own body, Elise is still dead, but she turns around and she sees somebody in the Further, and then it cuts to black. And we don't know what happens, because then we go to Chapter 3 of the Insidious films, which is simply entitled Insidious Chapter 3. But we also get Insidious Spectral Sightings, a TV series. A series of shorts that starred Tucker and Specs, 3 episodes. And they investigate the ghost woman, who's played by Sylvia Baldacini, and these take place within the Insidious universe as well. Now on to Insidious Chapter 3, which takes place in 2015. Or rather, the movie came out in 2015, but the movie actually takes place in several years before the events of the first film, as it makes references that possibly Josh is still a child this time, and he doesn't have a family yet. It does definitely seem like it takes place many, many years prior to it. Possibly the year 2010, as they were using flip phones in the film. We're introduced to a new family and a new villain, the Man Who Can't Breathe, played by Michael Reed McKay. Lin Shaye's character Elise has just recently lost her husband, or within a year, and she's still grieving for him, and she's given up wanting to be a ghost hunter. She reluctantly agrees to use her abilities to contact the dead in order to help a teenage girl who's been targeted by the dangerous supernatural entities. This movie was directed and written by Leigh Whalen. Whannell. Sorry, I've been saying Whalen, but I meant Whannell, who plays Specs. And he takes over director duties for the film from James Wan, who was probably doing The Conjuring at this time, as he had basically moved on to that project. Each one of these movies becomes more and more successful, and the budget on them is extremely low. I have an opening weekend of about $10 million to $20 million. That's actually really good, considering that their budget was only around $10 million to begin with, and they go on to gross about $50 to $60 million. It makes it a huge success and a big profit turn for the studio, and that's why we keep getting them. The girl that Elise is trying to help breaks her legs, and she starts being visited by the Man Who Can't Breathe. So Elise has to go into the Further, and this is where she meets Tucker and Specs for the first time. And there are a couple of bumbling ghost hunters, kind of like the Ghostface Ghostfacers in the TV series Supernatural that Sam and Dean encounter, but a lot worse. But at least straightens them out. She's able to help this girl, and with the help of this girl's mother who had died in the apartment building, they're able to banish the man who can't breathe, but at least also unfortunately meets the woman in the black wedding gown who wants to kill her. Now we move over to Insidious the Last Key, which came out last weekend in the year 2018, which happens to be this year. Once again, Elise is joined by Specs and Tucker, played by Angus Sampson and Leigh Whannell, and is directed by Adam Robitel. Now you have to excuse me as I definitely probably mispronounced the names. You have to go back to Elise's old house in New Mexico, and we actually get the origin story of Elise and what happened to her, as well as her father, who was kind of an asshole. Her father is played by Gerald Rayner. Her father, Gerald Rayner, is played by Josh Stewart. She also meets her nieces for the first time, Audrey Rayner and Melissa Rayner, played by Spencer Locke and Tessa Farrer. Bruce Davidson also joins us as Christian Rayner, her brother. She hasn't been to her home since she left her brother in the care of her father and ran away when she was 16 years old because she couldn't take her father's abuse anymore. We come to learn that what happened was her father was actually being manipulated by an evil spirit, and Elise needs to put a stop to it because her father wasn't entirely to blame for all of his actions. The spirit was having her father kidnap and kill young girls because they find a girl locked up in the basement of the house that they're investigating for somebody. Her house is currently owned by Ted Garza, played by Kirk Acevedo. When Keyface, as the villain is known to be called, played by Javier Botet, kidnaps one of Elise's nieces and she ends up in a coma in the hospital, very similar to Dalton in the first movie. Elise has to go into the further once again in order to save her niece's life. But with the help of the sister, who's still alive, they're able to pull her out and save the day, reuniting Christian and Elise as a family that has been torn apart through tragedy once again. Tucker and Specs also come into the third film with a business that they started called Spectral Sightings, which carries over into part 4. It's very amateurish until they team up with Elise. By this film, they also have their own kind of like a battle van, which looks like, and they use it to be able to tour around to hunt down the ghosts, spooks, and spirits that they have. Elise, of course, also, while in the further, encounters Dalton and then gets a ring at the end of the movie from Dalton's grandmother, Josh's mother, that something's happened to him and that she needs to come back and help the family that she saved many years ago. I love all the Insidious movies. One is not so much better than the other, but the last two movies really focus on Elise's character, played by the great Lin Shaye. And another thing you got to point out is that this is the only movie franchise that is played by a woman in her 70s. Most movie franchises are played by women in their 20s or 30s. I think the second oldest woman holding a franchise by herself was Kate Beckinsale for the Underworld movies. She was in her 40s when the last Underworld movie came out. But she hasn't been holding that franchise together in her 40s like Lin Shaye has in her 60s and 70s. So we have to give it up for Lin Shaye. There hasn't been another horror movie icon quite like her in so many years. We haven't had an older woman icon in any type of genre since, I believe, Angela Lansbury in Murder, She Wrote. If I'm wrong, comment in the comment section below for another female that led such a great franchise. That's Chris with Radio of Horror signing off. Make sure you like, subscribe, and comment on the other videos here, and check out the rest of my content on the Radio of Horror show here on YouTube and on my channel.